strategy to attack hundreds of political and military targets in those cities. And one of his essential aims to provoke a popular uprising right across the country.
Communist fighters, weapons and supplies had been slipping into towns and cities across South Vietnam. They came in vegetable carts and even in funeral processions, all under the noses of the Americans and their South Vietnamese allies. But how was it that such a huge reservoir of men and supplies had been gathered so close to the cities, largely unnoticed by the Americans? One of the answers lay right beneath their feet.
Throughout the countryside of South Vietnam, the Viet Cong guerrilla fighters had constructed an intricate network of tunnels, and the entrances were always well hidden.
Here we go. Now, this may look narrow, but believe me, it's actually been widened for Western tourists, so I should be able to fit in it no problem. Oh, just put some leaves to obscure the entrance when I've gone through.
This labyrinth of tunnels at Cu Chi near Saigon was over 200 miles long in total. This complex was so well hidden that an American base was unwittingly built right on top of it.
They had everything they needed down here. They had water, sleeping accommodation, storerooms, and even hospital facilities. What the Viet Cong had done in these dark and cramped tunnels was create a hidden fighting community capable of taking the battle into the heart of Saigon and the surrounding area.
We were working day and night. It was a time of very secret and intensive activity. That's why Cu Chi was important. The tunnels were where preparations were made.
By the end of January 1968, these tunnels were busier than ever. The weapons stockpiled here were smuggled into the cities. All this was in preparation for the largest communist onslaught of the Vietnam War.
As January drew to a close, most Vietnamese were preoccupied with preparations of a very different kind. The Tet Lunar New Year was approaching, a very important holiday in the Vietnamese year, rather like Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter all rolled up into one. And many South Vietnamese soldiers, believing that a traditional truce was in effect, had been given leave to go off and visit their families in the country. But as festivities got going that evening in late January, there was a lot more happening than met the eye.
It was January the 31st, and under cover of the Tet celebrations, a group of Viet Cong were driving towards downtown Saigon. Their mission? To take control of the government radio station, then broadcast a call to arms for the people to rise up and overthrow the government of South Vietnam. Just before 3 a.m., the convoy of Viet Cong fighters pulled up outside the building.
One of the Viet Cong leapt out of the lead jeep and shot dead the confused radio station guard. The war had come to the heart of Saigon. The Tet offensive had begun.
With the capital of South Vietnam under attack, news crews in the city relayed eyewitness reports into homes across the world.
Well, here we are. We're right in the center of Saigon, just opposite the presidential palace. And I am in the driveway of the Republic of South Korean Embassy. This gunfire that you can hear is pretty close. It's coming in above our heads. It seems like a major firefight is starting at this moment.
As the night wore on, news of attacks poured in from all over the city. General Westmoreland's own headquarters was attacked, and the nearby airport of Tan Son Nhut. The Viet Cong even seized the racetrack at Phu Top. It was the perfect rallying point for their fighters. But they also wanted to hold it to prevent the Americans from using it as a helicopter landing zone. In the city's center, they attacked the naval dockyard, and the radio station they stormed was nearby. Even the presidential palace came under attack. But there was another objective that night, just a block away from the palace. It may have been less imposing, but it was to prove a much more rewarding target.
Earlier, a group of Viet Cong fighters had gathered in a garage to make final preparations for this attack.
Now, everybody present at this meeting were members of the Viet Cong C-10 battalion. They may have been few in number, and they may have had limited firepower, but the results of that night's C-10 mission would reverberate around the world. Here at the US Embassy, the symbol of American power and presence in Vietnam, that C-10 squad of Viet Cong fighters from the garage blew a 3-foot hole in the bottom of this perimeter wall. Their two leaders rushed in but were shot and killed by the American guards. Those guards then radioed for help, but it was the last message they'd ever sent, because then they too were gunned down in a hail of VC fire. After killing the guards, the remaining Viet Cong poured through the hole in the wall and into the compound itself. But their leaders were dead, and the momentum petered out. Instead of charging forward into the heart of the embassy, they took up position around here and simply fired pot shots at the building.
A few blocks away from the American embassy, news of the chaos had reached newspaper and television reporters staying nearby. They rushed to the scene to find that reinforcements sent by American commanders were still milling around outside the embassy compound, with the Viet Cong inside.
Lying flat in the gutter, I didn't know where the VC attackers were holed up, or where the fire was coming from. But we knew it was the big story.
The journalists couldn't believe what was happening. From what they could see, it seemed that the VC had stormed and captured part of the US Embassy right here in the heart of Saigon. Realizing the huge symbolic implications of this, they sent back reports within hours of the attack from the beleaguered embassy to news desks right around the world.
Now CIA men and MPs have gone into the embassy and are trying to get the snipers out by themselves.
Military police got back into the compound of the $2.5 million embassy complex at dawn. Before that, a platoon of Viet Cong were in control. The communist raiders never got into the main Chancery building. A handful of Marines had it locked and kept them out. But the raiders were everywhere else.
By the time people back home were watching the shocking news reports from the embassy, the Americans had regained the upper hand. What one US commander described as a piddling platoon action was all over within 6 hours. But what may have seemed militarily insignificant was crucial to the battle for the minds of the American public. The pictures on television of the Viet Cong on American soil, here inside their own embassy compound, sent shockwaves across the United States. In spite of this, the reality in Saigon was that the embassy attack had been crushed and the threat to the capital had been contained. Any fighting now was just mopping up. But the Tet Offensive was far from over. Within minutes of each other, scores of bases, towns and cities had been attacked all over the country. One US general said his map was lighting up with news of assaults like a pinball machine. An estimated 84,000 troops, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, had hurled themselves at the centers of power. The Americans and South Vietnamese managed to restore control very quickly. Everywhere, that is, except in one of the most important cities in the country. What happened there was to be one of the bloodiest battles in the Vietnam War. Previously unknown